Okay, over to you, Amy. Just want to know a few things about the historical unit that you've done. Can you just explain some of the things that you've learned over the course of this year and how it's affected your performance? Anything that relates to your performance work?
I've learned a lot about physical theatre.
Mm-hmm.
Done bits on site specific,
Mm-hmm.
learning about all the isms, naturalism, realism, existentialism.
Mm-hmm.
Physical theatre, I learned about Pina Bausch and Jet Lecoq, and we've done music through the years, where I learned about the different styles through the decades.
Okay, the HND group was very instrumental in helping devise the Music Through the Years performance. We looked at various historical periods, and as part of the performance you will have been asked to do various bits and pieces. Can you talk about some of the dance things that you were involved in?
The first dancey bit I was in was the Rock Around the Clock.
Okay, and that's what period in history?
50s.
1950s?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the 1950s. What was happening in the 1950s that affects what we have in our theatre or musical theatre today?
It was just a lot to do with the big costumes, I think, and the big skirts and the bows. The bows played a big part in the dances then, whether it be neckties or bows in the head. Okay,
you were in one of the rock and roll 1950s dances.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about it.
The jive, it was a simple hand movement that you were bouncing with your feet, and it was just like, it went to the music really well, and like I think the audience got involved with it because it was easy to follow.
Okay, so if we were to take the 1950s and we were to take a musical that's happened in the last few years, Hairspray, can you see the connection between the two?
Yeah, because like it's similar movements, but like not as simple as what the jive is. So
right.
And it's similar costumes as well. So the music's similar too.
Right.
In ways.
And if I was to ask you about the 1950s, what would you say about the 1950s?
I'd say it was a great period of time.
Do you think it was a fun period of time?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Okay, let's move on. So, would you say that things from the past affect the way that we work in the present?
Yeah, because I think like people use things from the past and use it to modernise and make their own mark on it. Okay,
so if we were looking at past practice, can you see how it impacts on today's modern world?
I think it's always used. It's never forgotten.
Right.
So it's always there, whether it be an impact or whether it be part of it, it's always there.
Right, so you've done quite a lot of dancing, haven't you?
Yeah.
So would you consider, as a performer, how would you consider yourself?
I consider myself as a great performer because I get down to it.
Okay.
And I work for and make sure that even if it's only me on the stage, I'm putting 110% into that performance.
I see, right, okay. So let's just have a look. Do you understand about different audiences? Can you tell me about the way in which a performance takes place? And can you see how things from the past have affected the way that we see performance today? Do you understand the question?
Yeah.
Right, okay, let's make the question a little bit easier. If we were doing site specific, a performance would be with an audience walking round to various venues and seeing a performance. A traditional performance is a performance in a space where people pay to see a show and the curtain opens and people are on stage. Can you see the merits in both types of performance?
Yeah, like whereas in site specific, like the audience are there, they're getting involved, they're going to the different places, they're not sat there feeling like they're not part of it, they're just watching the show, whereas in site specific, they're actually playing a part by just walking to these different places and venues.
Okay. Do you understand what a genre is? Do you know what a genre is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Styles.
It's a particular style.
Yeah.
So if we were looking at different genres, you would be able to identify different genres within the musical performance.
Yeah.
Right. So how would you describe, I mean, this is a trick question now, how would you describe what was happening in the 60s?
I don't know.
Well, think about what we did for the 60s. We had Austin Powers,
Yeah,
we had hippies,
yeah,
and how would you compare that sort of dance
yeah.
to 1950s dance?
Because 1950s dances are less more groovy than what it was in the 1960s.
Right, describe the word groovy. How would you...
Groovy is all extravagant and silly dance and this around your eyes, and whereas 1950s...
Show me 1950s then.
1950s was all the dive and the bouncing on your feet and your legs up high, and there was more energy used in the 1950s, I think.
Talk about skill threshold. You're a dance person. Talk about the skill thresholds involved in the two types of dance. How would you describe?
I think in the 1950s you've got to be quick.
Right.
And you've got to know what you're doing when you're doing it, because there's no time for fails.
Right.
In the 1960s, I think it eases the pressure of it because it's a lot more slower.
Right.
You don't have to constantly be bouncing. In the hairspray, it's more about your steps that you take. You need to know where you're going and when you're doing it.
And there's a history to these steps, would you say?
I definitely said that there's definitely a history to it.
Right. And
There's
so,
got to be a root of it where it began.
okay. What else? When you were in the musical moments thing, you did another set of skills as well. What were the other set of skills that you were doing?
I was singing.
Right. Okay. And talk to me about your song choice, please.
It was Valerie by Amy Winehouse.
Okay. And what other sort of musical things did we have in there? Did we have?
We had Marilyn Monroe,
Right.
Oasis,
Okay. Talk to me about where would you say the historical influences from Oasis came from?
the Beatles.
Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
We used the Beatles quite a bit in the performance, didn't we? So the ideas of the Beatles and stuff like that. Okay, we're coming towards the end of this now. I'm interested in if your future, what would you do? The skills that you've got from the historical unit, if I said to you, you had a projected job and you were a facilitator, a workshop leader or a dance group leader, do you think you have the historical skills necessary to produce a piece of performance work?
100%, definitely. Like, my knowledge in that now has grown, and I could pass that on to them within teaching them.
Okay.
What I know.
And you think you have a skill set that will be able to,
Yeah.
and you've got transferable skills that you've used and gained that can be used in another situation. Okay, Amy, thank you very much for your time.